You are competing with the people you love. Not against them, not exactly, but alongside them, quietly, constantly, in a race neither of you declared and both of you have been running. This is not a flaw in your character. It is not a failure of your affection. It is something older than both of those things, a drive that does not pause because someone matters to you. If anything, it sharpens because they do. You track them, you measure the distance. You notice when it closes and when it widens, and you feel both of those things in ways that are difficult to name cleanly. The part of you that wants them to succeed is real. The part of you that needs to remain relevant beside their success, that part is also real. You have probably spent years keeping those two things from meeting each other directly. This is what happens when they do. There are two friends, they have known each other for years. They share the same general world, similar work, similar ambitions, overlapping social circles. On the surface, they support each other well. They check in. They celebrate the good news. They show up when things are hard. But over time, something quiet begins to shift. One of them gets a recognition, a promotion, a moment where people notice them in a way they have not noticed the other. And the second person, the one who receives the news over the phone, who says all the right things, who genuinely feels happy, also feels something else. Something smaller, something they do not quite name. A slight tightening, a private reckoning. They spend the rest of the day in a mood they cannot explain. They are not angry, they are not bitter. They would be horrified to be described that way. But they are unsettled. They review their own recent months. They compare timelines. They wonder with a kind of restless discomfort whether they are falling behind, not in life in general, but specifically in the quiet race that has been running between the two of them, unannounced, without either of them agreeing to enter it. Nobody started this race. Nobody declared it. It simply began. And the strangest part is that the friendship itself is real. The care is real. These things are not performances. They can coexist, the love and the competition, in the same relationship at the same time, felt by the same person. That is what makes it so difficult to see. Nietzsche wrote about something he called the will to power, not as a desire to control or dominate others, but as a fundamental drive within every person to expand, to assert, to become more than they currently are. It is not a flaw, it is not a character defect. He saw it as one of the most honest truths about human nature, that life, at its most basic level, is always reaching, always comparing where it is to where it could be, always measuring itself against what surrounds it. The trouble is not the drive, the trouble is the hiding. When the second person felt that quiet tightening after their friend's good news, they were not experiencing a failure of character. They were experiencing something deeply, almost embarrassingly human. The drive to matter, to be significant, to feel like your life is moving, does not pause when you love someone. It does not take a break because someone is your friend, your sibling, your partner. It simply redirects. It finds its mirror in the people nearest to you, the ones whose lives are close enough to yours to serve as a measure. That is what makes close relationships so complex. The people you love are also often the most convenient yardstick you have. Not because you chose them for that purpose, but because they are near, because you know their details, because their life and your life share enough surface area that comparison becomes almost automatic. And because the stakes feel real. A stranger's success lands differently than the success of someone you have sat with through hard years. When it is a stranger, there is distance. You can observe it, appreciate it, move on. When it is someone you love, someone whose beginning you witnessed, whose doubts you heard, whose version of the same struggle you shared, the distance collapses. Their achievement does not exist somewhere far away from your own story. It exists right next to it, almost overlapping. That is where the tightening comes from, not from cruelty, from closeness. The measurement happens precisely because the two of you have been, in some meaningful way, running in the same terrain. And here is the part that is even harder to sit with. The closer the relationship, the more the other person's progress reflects something back at you. Their advancement becomes, in the privacy of your own mind, a quiet commentary on your own pace, your own choices, the places you held still when perhaps you should have moved. This is not entirely rational. You know intellectually that two lives are not in competition, that another person's timing has nothing to do with yours. But knowing something and feeling it are two entirely different experiences. Nietzsche understood that this drive, this constant reaching and comparing, was not something that could be reasoned away or spiritually transcended. It was too fundamental for that. What could change, though, was whether a person chose to look at it honestly or continued to dress it in more acceptable clothing. The first shift is simply recognizing this. Not judging it, not fixing it. Just seeing it clearly. But here is where it gets more uncomfortable. Because the competition is rarely about the obvious things. It is not just about promotions or recognition or visible success. Those moments are easy enough to identify. They come with a clear event, a clear trigger. You can trace the feeling back to its source. What is harder to see is the quieter kind, the competition for emotional authority. Who is the more stable one, who handles things with more grace, who is listened to more carefully in a group, who seems, without anyone explicitly saying it, like the one who has it more together? These things are never spoken aloud. There is no category for them in any list of relationship problems. And yet they shape conversations. They influence how much space a person takes up. They determine who speaks first, who defers, who holds back. There are relationships where one person has quietly claimed the role of the wise one, the measured one, the calm center, and where the other person, over years, has arranged themselves around that claim. Neither person agreed to this arrangement consciously, but both of them have been living inside it. It shows up in small things, in who gets asked for advice most often, in who the group turns to when something goes wrong, in who feels comfortable offering an opinion without qualifying it first. These arrangements solidify slowly. They harden into something that feels permanent, even natural, and for long stretches, both people accept them because the arrangement offers something: stability, predictability, a sense of knowing what role you occupy in someone else's life. But arrangements like this are never perfectly stable. They are always quietly under renegotiation. And sometimes, when the so-called wiser one makes a mistake, or when the other one offers unexpected insight that lands well, there is a strange disturbance in the air. Not conflict, not argument, just a kind of imperceptible recalibration. a silent negotiation about who is allowed to occupy which role. Have you ever felt that? A moment when someone you love said something wise, and instead of feeling simply glad, you felt briefly displaced. Or when you offered a perspective and noticed yourself hoping, just slightly, that it would be received as more insightful than theirs. These are not shameful impulses, they are honest ones. But most people move through them without ever acknowledging what they actually are. Nietzsche had a concept he called ressentiment, a French word he used deliberately, because he felt it captured something that ordinary words for resentment did not fully reach. Ressentiment, as he described it, is what happens when the will to power, that drive to expand, to assert, to matter, gets blocked or turned inward. When a person cannot or will not acknowledge their own desire for significance, the energy does not disappear. It transforms. It becomes a quiet, slow-burning dissatisfaction, a way of measuring others not to understand them, but to diminish them, so that the gap between what you want and where you are becomes more bearable. This does not always look like resentment. It often looks like criticism dressed as concern, like praising someone while subtly noting their limitations, like supporting someone's growth while privately hoping it stays within a manageable range. It looks from the outside like love, and part of it is love. That is what makes this pattern so difficult to untangle. There is a particular version of this that shows up in very close relationships, the kind where two people have been in each other's lives long enough to have developed a shared identity of sorts, where the question of who you are has become, over time, slightly inseparable from the question of who they are. In relationships like this, the other person's growth is not a neutral event. It is a rearrangement of the architecture that both people have been living inside. If they become more capable, more admired, more at ease with themselves, then what does that mean for the way you have always understood yourself in relation to them? This is not a thought most people complete consciously. It is more of a pressure, an internal adjustment that happens without words. And the way it most often expresses itself is not through cruelty or obvious hostility. It is through a kind of subtle dampening, a slight but persistent effort to keep things where they were. Not because the person wants the other to fail, but because the current arrangement feels known. And the unknown, even when it involves someone's flourishing, can be deeply unsettling. Think of the sibling who has always been the dependable one, the one who helps, the one who is looked to in a crisis. When the other sibling begins to find their own footing, begins to offer the same kind of grounded presence, the first sibling may find themselves, unexpectedly, in a kind of grief they cannot name. Not grief that something bad has happened, grief that something they did not know they were holding onto has shifted. The role was not just a role, it was an identity, a way of mattering. And identities do not release easily, even when the person holding them would tell you sincerely that they want nothing more than the other person's well-being. Both of those things can be true at the same time. The competition that exists inside close relationships often grows not from cruelty, but from a need that was never given permission to be named. A need to feel significant, to feel like your life has weight, to feel like you are not disappearing into someone else's story. When that need goes unacknowledged, when it is considered too embarrassing or too selfish to admit, it does not go away. It goes underground. And underground it runs without oversight, without honesty, without the chance to be seen and renegotiated. The person who never acknowledges that they want to matter will find other, less conscious ways of protecting that desire, often at the expense of the people they love most. Not out of malice, out of blindness. There is something Nietzsche observed that is easy to miss unless you sit with it. He noticed that the people we admire most are often also the ones we unconsciously want to surpass. Not replace, not destroy. Surpass. There is something in the admiration itself, in the genuine appreciation for what another person has achieved or who they have become, that quietly ignites a corresponding hunger. To be that, to reach that, to eventually go further. In a stranger, this hunger is acceptable. We call it inspiration. In someone we love, it becomes harder to name, because loving someone is supposed to mean wanting for them without wanting against them. And yet the two are not always so cleanly separated. Think of the relationship where one person has long been the more accomplished one, the one others look to, the anchor in some respects. And think of how the other person in that relationship has always quietly, genuinely, without drama, admired them. This admiration is real. It is not performance. They have held the other person in a kind of regard that has shaped their own standards, their own sense of what is possible. But admiration, when it is sustained for long enough, begins to carry a second weight. Because to admire someone across years is also to remain, in some part of your mind, in a position below them. The admiring person, the one still reaching towards something the other has already arrived at. And at some point, gradually, almost imperceptibly, that position can start to chafe. Not because anything changed externally, but because the person doing the admiring has grown too, has accumulated their own experience, their own clarity, their own reasons to feel capable. And yet the old arrangement persists. The other person is still the anchor, still the one others look to, still in the architecture of the relationship, the one slightly ahead. And then something shifts. The admired one begins to struggle. Something does not go their way. The gap that once felt fixed begins slowly to close. In that moment, there is sometimes something uncomfortable that moves through the other person, something they do not fully welcome, something that feels like relief. Not relief that the person is suffering. They do not want that, they are not that. But relief that the distance has narrowed, that the measure has shifted, that the long-running arrangement between them has softened slightly. That is the quiet truth. Not that you do not love the people you compete with, but that the competition has been running this whole time in the background, untouched, unnamed, shaping how you feel about yourself inside the relationship. And how you have, without realizing it, allowed the relationship to shape you. Nietzsche was not optimistic in a comfortable way. He did not offer reassurance. He did not tell people that these drives, once acknowledged, would soften into something easier to live with. What he offered instead was something rarer, permission for honesty. He believed that the examined life, the one where a person looks clearly at what actually moves inside them, was more honest and ultimately more livable than a life spent maintaining a carefully constructed image of one's own goodness. He called the people willing to do this work great in a way he did not mean as flattery. He meant it as a description of a kind of courage, the courage to see yourself without a softening filter. Most people do not take that kind of look, not because they are cowardly, but because the culture around them has offered a more comfortable alternative. A self-image built on being the generous one, the supportive one, the one who does not compete because they are above all that. That self-image is not a lie exactly. It contains real parts of who the person is. But it is also incomplete, and maintaining an incomplete self-image requires a constant, low-level effort, a persistent smoothing over of the moments that do not fit, a quiet forgetting of the tightening, the watching, the small relief at another person's stumble. This effort is exhausting, and it keeps the competition underground where it cannot be examined. That is what becomes available when you stop hiding it. Not a resolution, not a cure, but a different kind of honesty. One where you can sit across from someone you love and know, without shame, without drama, that you also want to matter to the same degree they do. That their success sometimes stirs something in you that is not purely generous. That the care you feel for them and the watching you do are not opposites. They coexist. And the relationship does not collapse when that coexistence is acknowledged. In many cases, it deepens, because honesty, even the kind that stays private, that is never spoken aloud, changes the texture of how you show up. The performance of unconditional generosity requires distance. You have to keep people at an angle where your own desires are not visible. But genuine closeness does not require that distance. It can hold the full picture, the love and the wanting and the watching, without needing any of it to be hidden. Most people will never say this out loud. But something shifts when it becomes conscious. The underground competition loses some of its invisibility, and therefore some of its power. Not because naming a thing eliminates it, but because what is named can be witnessed. What is witnessed can be questioned. What is questioned can, over time, be held differently. The drive to matter will not disappear. Nietzsche would say it is not supposed to. But who you become while honoring that drive, whether you do it with awareness or without it, makes all the difference. Competition between people who love each other is not a sign that the love is false. It is a sign that each person inside the relationship is still trying to become something, still reaching, still measuring, still afraid of falling behind. The question is not whether you compete. The question is whether you are willing to know that you do. You do not have to become someone different. You do not have to dismantle the relationships where this lives, or confess to the people involved, or turn this into a project of self-improvement. What is being offered here is smaller than any of that. Just a moment of recognition. The person you love, the one you cheer for, the one you call first with your own news, the one whose approval still matters more than you usually admit, that person is also, in some quiet part of your mind, a mirror. A measure. A companion in a race that neither of you chose, and both of you have been running. There is nothing wrong with you for that. There is something deeply, honestly human about it. And knowing it, really knowing it, not just having read it, changes the texture of how you move through those relationships. Not with more competition, with more honesty, which in the end is the only thing that ever made any relationship feel truly close.